City Public Schools, specifically, again, Roanoke Academy for mathematics and science. I ask you not only to listen to their words, but to your own words, because as LaDonna alluded to, almost a year and a half ago, I spoke to most of you at the 2022 Northwest Virginia Community City Council Forum. I asked, do you support the rezoning and development of the Evans Springs area for business? Yes or no, and why? Councilwoman Vivian Sanchez-Jones, you said, I don't support the development of business, but I do support residential because we do need the house and we need the affordable housing. Councilman Peter Volleson, you said no. You said, I think our priority should always be to see what we can first redevelop. Vice Mayor Joe Cobb, you said no. I do support residential because I think we need more homes, new affordable homes, but I think they have to align with the neighborhood. And Councilman Luke Preddy, you said no, and noted that since the November election would determine a majority on council, a majority of council opposes commercial development. That means that this is not going to be rezoned for business as long as anyone up here is elected. Since the majority of you stated that you would vote no, I ask that you listen to the voices in this room and listen to your own words and vote no. Thank you.
Does that conclude the speakers, Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
All right. With that being said, we will close the public hearing, and at this time, I will ask my colleagues for their comments, and I'll start. Who would want to start?
Can we ask some questions, Mayor, of our
staff?
Yes.
Yes.
First. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chairman, I don't know that you're going to be able to answer this. You've dispelled a lot of the questions that I had, but one of them was about the lake area and the tributaries. Has been excluded, correct? How many acres of that? Do you know exactly how many acres in that portion has been excluded from being developed?
I believe it's about 50 acres.
About 50 acres.
50 acres. So just for a visual, you'll see that this is the lake area. This is the Fairland neighborhood and over here as well. And so this is kind of sits down in a bowl right here. And so all that green area, that lake, you can see where the dam once created the lake. And there's another series of dams, and then it turns into this tributary that makes its way into Lick Run. Lick Run runs through the property here. And you'll see that on both sides of Lick Run, there's a green riparian buffer. Also, there isn't one here, but one would be created. There we go. That's just a pasture, open pasture land.
Okay, and I was just jotting down some of the concerns that were raised, and I'm sure some of my colleagues would have some of the same questions. But the access, the interchange, which direction is that going to come from? I heard that it's going to be across on the other side, or will there be access from both sides to the interchange?
So the interchange is here. So this is just for orientation. This is 581.
Right.
And the interchange exists right here, and then this part would be built into the property and come over here, and then you could also turn left to come up this road. And so they would, on both plans, you'll see places where they have strategically located a pedestrian-only street where you can't go. You can kind of go get most of the development, but you can't get through. So I thought they were pretty creative in coming up with that approach to managing the traffic, because of just simply by virtue of putting the interchange in, and if there's no development, it would create unacceptable levels of traffic on the neighborhood streets. So they decided very early on to not have any through traffic. Their models just showed it kind of broke things from a transportation, and so many off-site improvements and upgrades would be needed that it would be best for all involved to truncate access from between the interchange and the surrounding neighborhood.
Okay, and can we hear from your expert on the flood and the mitigation that has been incorporated into the plan?
Sure. So Ian Shaw, I believe, is back here, and he is a professional civil engineer where he worked in our department and now heads up, has moved over back into the engineering world and is working head of our stormwater management division. And his division did a study, an independent study of the downstream impacts.
Thank you, and thank you. And I know everybody's been here. It's been a long evening, but these are some of the questions that were raised by some of the remarks and some of the comments from the residents, and I just want to make sure that they are addressed, and so that I understand as well.
Okay.
So, are there mitigation efforts in place to try to stop flooding or mitigate it, or?
Well, I think some of the things that this current plan shows, the proposed plan, would be, in particular, the plan calls for reestablishing the wetland area or the floodplain area along Lick Run. So right now it is a highly eroded, highly incised, impaired channel. It's definitely not in very good shape from an ecological perspective. So part of this plan would allow for that stream to be restored as well as the floodplain areas on both sides. So in the high water levels, the water is going to spill into the floodplain area, help with flood protection rather than just staying in an eroded and incised channel. So that's one of the big things that this plan would help with, is restoring that more natural function of Lick Run. It also calls for, looking at including low impact development measures if the area is developed, so there'd be permeable pavement, bioretention areas. The plan also encourages that all of that management be done on site. For a project of this size, the state code would allow 25% of those measures to be done off site, but this plan would encourage that all to be done on site. So those things would all come together to help mitigate flood risk from the development.
Okay, and that was the only thing that, I have a ton of things written down, but I think they were answered by Mr. Chittum in his presentation, but those are some of the things that I heard coming from the public hearing.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. May I ask a follow-up question to that?
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about the floodplain area and impervious surfaces. You spoke a little bit about this, and I think one of the things that's really important to note about the plan you've presented is that right now, the only people who legally have access to this land are the people who own it. Correct. And to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not aware of any major mitigation or work that's been done by them or on their behalf to do any Lick Run Creek restoration or the wetlands restoration, some of the things. So this plan creates access to that. It also does some of the restoration work, and that's one of the things I like about this plan. So I'll just say that up front. My concern is twofold. One is that we have floodplain information that tells us what's happened. We cannot fully predict what will happen. And with climate change, and we just adopted our climate action plan, we can put a lot of stuff in motion to mitigate that, to protect it. My concern is that I'm concerned that the floodplain is actually going to increase rather than decrease. And if that's the case, how do we address that, not only on this property, but downstream? One of our priorities that's emerging is, runway expansion. That's upstream. I don't know what the impact or implications of that will be. That's well down the road, but it's something on the horizon that we have to be aware of. So when I look at all these connecting points, all the way to downtown, it's really important to me to hear, how do we plan to mitigate that with this notion that the floodplain could actually increase rather than decrease. I'm not saying it will, but we don't know. And my further concern about that is the amount of impervious surface that this plan shows, which I have great concern about, particularly with the Land Bay A. and just, what the implications are for that. So anything you can share about that. You can't predict the future, I know that. But that's really important to me, and it's been important to a lot of people in this process.
Right, so I think, part of that's definitely details that have to come looking at an actual plan. So that would get back to, are they going to use permeable pavement, green roofs? There's a lot of details like that can help mitigate some of that impervious surface. Kind of looking at climate change, that becomes a little more complicated just in the sense of that wouldn't be unique just to Evans Spring. That would apply across the whole city where, floodplains could potentially grow. I think that's something that, we're in stormwater, we're looking at that and how that would play into things. So one of the things with this plan would be looking at, if there is going to be a floodplain area established, maybe looking at what the design parameters of that would be, sort of, what kind of rainfall are we looking at when we size that? So, is it a 10-year storm, a 25-year storm? I think there's definitely details like that could be looked at as part of a plan review. So just making sure that we're looking at, what we think is likely to happen with climate change. Those are things that could be looked at in as a more detailed development plan is fleshed out. So I think that would definitely be a very important consideration, is not just, what we think is happening now, but what would likely happen going out towards the end of the century. And that could be factored in as we look at a design and whatnot. But again, that would not be unique just to this site. That would apply across the whole city and as a kind of a more global issue we need to look at. Thanks.
I'll just add that this plan shows no development in the floodway or the 100-year floodplain, and that is indeed a bit of extra buffer, if you will, because we develop in the floodplain all the time.
Yeah, I know.
South Jefferson, all of that is in the floodplain. The rezoning you approved for Riverdale tonight, sure. All of that is in the good amount of that is in the floodplain. This just stays out of the floodplain completely, so that does give you an extra measure of protection if the floodplain were to expand. And as Ian said, we can go back in and actually shape that floodplain back into a more natural state, like it may have existed before all the upstream development occurred, so that it can handle more properly not only the 100-year flood we know about right now, but perhaps it will definitely help handle one that we haven't anticipated yet, certainly.
Thank you.
Hope that responds to.
Thank you.
All right, well,
Stay close.
okay. Okay, Ms. Moore-Mello.
All right, thank you. I just have a couple of things before I even make my comments, but this pertains to a couple of emails that were received. One was from Tom Carr, as you know, prior to your predecessor, who asked that council publicly view his presentation, which I did, and he wanted to make it part of the record. And he states that almost everything in his PowerPoint, which was 8 slides, was copied directly from the Evans Spring Development Plan, or the city's comprehensive plan of 2040. He asked that the presentation be shared, which it was not, because he could not be here. But he pointed out why the Evans Spring Development Plan as written should not be adopted as a component of the comprehensive plan, noting inconsistencies with basic elements set forth in the comprehensive plan and his concerns with implementation, which the City Planning Commission report was consistent with, such as the interwoven equity priorities. He said priority 1 was trust. There is still a responsibility for city government and its current leadership to regain trust following the trauma, which Moses spoke about, experienced by African American communities. For the community to thrive as a whole, the city government must work to build the trust through its action. And he went on and said, as recommended, he mentioned land-based B and C are clearly not consistent with the 2 most recent neighborhood elements of City Plan 2040. The building to the right of the Woodlands, I believe, you may be able to point that out, which is closest to Andrews Road, is where there's going to be a 150-room hotel. and conference center. He said doing such a dramatic changes doesn't build trust in the city's plan. And he mentions the resilient economic priorities. He says the plan recommends more retail space than the market can absorb in the next 10 years. Much of it is a large footprint retail chain development, which we've already talked about. Is this approach not contrary to City Plan 2040 priorities for a resilient economy? He also talks about the land use priorities. If the plan was consistent with the City Plan 2040, would there be a reason to buffer or screen residential or commercial uses from adjacent homes? There is also a 25-foot tall retaining wall just west of Norris Drive. How will it affect those homes? That was one of his questions. He went on with transportation. He said the priority there was great streets support great places policy. And he says coordinate land use and transportation to encourage appropriate development around neighborhood centers along corridors. The plan does not include public transportation. The access is designed only for emergency services, bicyclists, pedestrians, and vehicles serving the businesses and properties in the development. Public transportation and school buses are not mentioned anywhere in the plan. The city is committing itself to an unknown share of an estimated $65 million in site development costs and an unknown share of off-site roadway infrastructure that will be required for this plan. And he says, shouldn't the city know what costs the taxpayers will bear before approving this plan as city policy? Only forecasted general government expenses are shown. The plan is highly detailed with specific building locations, types, and sizes. Why is that necessary if the configuration of the site is still subject to negotiation? And he asks, will the developer or city be required to build and maintain community centers and business incubators? Are the projected rents, home prices, square footage, and so forth intended to be the floor or the ceiling for the development? Will they be required? Is the city committing to maintaining all of the proposed park spaces? And lastly, he asks why not adopt these written recommendations and rezoning tenants as the city's policy, accept the details as matters of information, but leave the details to be determined during rezoning. While there is much to commend about the plan, it introduces 370,000 square feet of commercial development directly into the Melrose Rugby neighborhood, including a large footprint store of around 100,000 square feet, about the size of Home Depot on Hirschberger Road, and a 150-room hotel and conference center practically across the street from the elementary school or equal concern. This plan commits the city to participate in an unknown cost to an unknown degree to complete an interchange to serve one property and to upgrades that will be needed to the surrounding neighborhood street system. He concludes by asking that the council please consider adopting only the sections, quote, rezoning option, which is on page 36, and, quote, recommendations on page 10 as part of City Plan 2040, and accept the remainder as a study or a matter of information. So however you want to respond back.
Well, with all due respect to Mr. Carr, he's asking for a lot of detail that you would get at a rezoning hearing.
Right.
And so he skipped to the end significantly, because there's nothing in this plan that makes a financial commitment to the interchange. And in fact, it leaves those options open And, we could sit here and debate whether, housing is a good thing near the neighborhood the plan is what is presented. We recommended it to Planning Commission. Planning Commission, of a majority of it, 5-2 majority, advanced that to you. And so I read Mr. Carr's presentation over the weekend. There's a lot that I don't necessarily agree with. And I think contrary to the old way of doing things was to build a wall and put up some shrubs around stuff because it was obnoxious. And we know that's not the way we want to approach development here. Because if we go on the other side of the interstate, the neighborhoods have to get in their car and drive 2.5 miles to get to the movie theater that's right next to their house. And so that is a policy that City Council adopted back in 2013 that we don't want to repeat that. We want something that connects to the neighborhood and provides goods and services. Like I went through many neighborhood planning sessions where the neighborhood's telling me the grocery store moved out of my neighborhood, the pharmacy moved out of my neighborhood, and I want that back. You need to take positive action to bring those things back to my neighborhood. This plan can do that. The 100,000 square foot building that Mr. Carr points out is designated as a grocery store.
Right.
A full service grocery store. So, I mean,
and what about the inconsistencies with some of the priorities that he was referencing, such as the interwoven equity one, where he talks about the trust, city government.
We've gone through a process here that going back to 2011, that we have engaged people in the planning. And so I think we have been careful and deliberate in that, and we're going through yet another step. Even if City Council adopts this tonight, there will be another step, the rezoning hearing and the rezoning plan that will be filed as part of that. So I think on that front, but also providing in proximity to the neighborhood, the same kinds of things, greenways, access to goods and services, and the grocery store and things like that, and housing that are available in other neighborhoods. I think that is an equity issue because it's missing. It moved out of the neighborhood years ago. And certainly providing housing is something that we need in all neighborhoods as well. And the infrastructure, the being able to address with modern environmental standards related to stormwater, tree canopy, trying to keep parking areas as small as possible, all speak to that.
Thank you, Chris. Let me ask you something on environmental. So we've been talking about, I heard people talk about tonight about going down to the pond or Lake Run. The access with this plan, access to these Lake Runs and the pond will be provided by, there will be a recommendation for a greenway to be developed here, right?
Yes, that's correct, Mayor.
And right now, there is no public access to. Is there public access to the pond or Lake Run now?
No, you're trespassing if you're on it without permission of the owners. Yes.
So those individuals that went down and put the foot in the pond, they're trespassing.
You can, but you're not legally permitted to be on the property.
Okay. But with this, the greenway and what will this plan, it will be allowable. We'll be able to do that. They have access to it. That's the main thing.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. Is somebody asking something? Okay. I just want to ask a question. Okay. Sure.
Mr. Chittum, could you show us where would the Greenway connect Big Lake to Countryside?
Okay, so the Greenway, the Lick Run Greenway comes out of downtown, crosses 10th Street down around off the map. And then it comes here. This is Lick Run and crosses here. It goes through the development. you'll see that dotted line that goes along there. And right now, that greenway comes up here and crosses the interstate. And so it could continue through and over here. And then hopefully connect up at some point. It's difficult to do, but connect up with the greenway segment we built at Countryside.
Okay, thank you.
All right, discussion, council members who want to start? I'll go with Mr. Bolson.
Ooh, what a night. Like, this has been a tough decision, and it has been something that's been going on in our city for almost over a decade now. I want to thank everybody who came here, who advocated. I want to thank everybody who was on the team of consultants and our planning team for all the work that they've done to advance this plan. I'm really excited that we have so many people that are passionate about Roanoke. That's a great thing to have. But I think on city council, we have a lot of different things that we have to weigh and balance out. Part of that is, right now we have an Evans Springs area plan that has no conservation in it at all. So if somebody were to come, if we were to say no to this plan and somebody were to come on Thursday and say, hey, I want to do a development like 2019. Now, I don't think that we would vote for it, but I don't know what a future council may do. And if there's no conservation in that plan, then they're most likely not going to do it. So what we're doing here is an iterative process. This is updating that master plan because we heard what everybody said in 2019. And rightfully, it was withdrawn because it was a lot of parking lots. It looked like any other, interstate intersection. So we went to the drawing board and said, hey, we want to hear more about what the community wants and make sure that that is part of what our next neighborhood plan is. And we did that. That's why we hired those consultants. I was there at the church meetings. I know that we've talked to folks. They've done community engagement. They've listened. If you go into the actual report, there were big issues that came up, like gentrification. And we did in-depth reports on that. We had technical people come in and do stormwater, businesses, development of affordable housing, looking at rainwater. Those technical reports have a lot of what I hope will be in the rezoning process, where we can say to them, we want X amount of canopy, we want this number of trees, where we want rain gardens, where we want public transportation to be a part of this. This is not our last bow in the air, or bow in the quiver. We still have a rezoning process that any development would have to go through. And we don't know when that development's going to come. It may never come. It may come in a year. So what we as council members have to do is say, okay, well, if it happens in a year, is it going to look more like what 2013 or the 2019 programs were, or was it going to look more like what we're approving today? Which I think is better than those previous plans. And I also know that we're going to have another iterative process with the rezoning to make it more detailed and hopefully get a lot of those things that we talk about so much, which is, again, rain gardens, gentrification, those things. We can put those into place in the rezoning. There were a couple of non-negotiables that were from the community, and the community engagement. One, do not create a link into 581 from the neighborhood. This master plan has achieved that. 2, do not take any housing from current neighborhood residents. Again, that plan has achieved that. Do not run traffic through the neighborhood. Again, the master plan has achieved that. Create strategies to mitigate gentrification. Now that is one that I think will have to be done in rezoning. And they have done a technical report to look in depth at that issue and how we can prevent gentrification from happening in this area if it were to be developed in the future. And I added number 5 because this wasn't on there, but I think it's pretty clear that we wanted to mitigate the environmental impacts around Evans Springs. That's been clear. It's been loud and clear from the public that that's an issue. Obviously, we've gotten a lot of information from y'all as well about heat islands, about conservation areas. And so we've had to look at all these different things. So I want to remind y'all that, yes, this is iterative. This is not the final word as to what is going to happen at Evans Springs, but this is making it better, more conservative, and using the land in a better way than it had been previously. And I also want to clear up, I am totally for redevelopment of brownfields. I would love nothing more than for Valley View to say, yeah, we want to be a town center. And I would love for us to be able to do those things, but those things take time, they take partnerships, and there's no guarantees that they're going to happen. And so if we can try and do those things, and on council, I will continue to fight for redevelopment in brownfields in places that are already developed, but I can't guarantee that's going to happen. And so if this were to happen and Evans Springs were to be developed, I want to make sure that we have a better plan than we did last time.
All right, is
So,
that,
no,
Okay.
yeah, sorry.
He said,
Taking a pause. So I hear the neighborhood and the environmental impacts and the things that you're talking about that we want to make sure don't happen in Evans Springs. And so that's why I would like to propose a substitute ordinance that would put the technical memos, the 8 technical memos, which are about gentrification, stormwater, those types of things, into the actual plan. So that in the future, when somebody comes to go get rezoned for this, those parts of this, those technical details about how we deal with gentrification and all that are part of the master plan. They have to be taken into account when they're doing that rezoning. I also want to designate Land Bay E as forested open space in this plan. So if you see that central group of single-family homes, thank you, Mr. Chittum, that area, which is right around the springs, which is fully forested, which is between 2 water bodies and where the wetlands are, would be protected in this amended plan, so that we are protecting Evans Springs and everything around it. And that water resource, that will help with flooding in the future. There are a lot of reasons why making that part of the conservation area is going to help with this plan. And by doing that, if I'm correct by the consultant's numbers, by doing that, the total open space of this plan would be roughly 76 acres of the 151, meaning more than half of this property would be open space and preserved for the future. So I'd like to officially submit that this updated plan for consideration by this body.
Are you looking, Mr. Veloson, to substitute this ordinance that I've handed out for the previous one?
Yes.
is that a motion?
Is that?
Yes, it's a motion.
Second.
let me have a question on it. Can we, now the floor is open for discussion on that. Could you outline that again, Mr. Chittum, that area that Councilman Bolson was discussing in terms of, that's the area again, and you jump in here, Peter, to make sure that that area is not going to be, just going to be closed in, or?
That would be conservation space. So it would not be any development on that space.
How many acres approximately is that you said?
It's about 5.8 acres.
Almost 6 acres.
Yeah.
Okay.
To remain a forested area is what substitute
So all of
ordinance
that be
says.
conserved.
I've looked,
Conservation.
I've looked at the different places where there are trees, where there aren't trees already, and that's an area that is, in my opinion, I'm not, an environmental expert, but it seems to be a place that would be important for the springs and keeping them clean for the future. And so keeping that area free of development, I think will help a lot of the flooding and heat island mitigation issues that have been brought up by the citizens.
Okay. So answer my question. Anybody? Anybody else have any questions on Mr. Bolson?
No, I don't have any questions, but I still have a comment.
All right, there's a motion and a
But the
second.
motion is on the floor.
Yes.
All right.
The motion would be to substitute this ordinance for the one that's already there.
To include almost 6 acres.
But it wouldn't be the approval of the ordinance.
So additional, to substitute.
Additional amendments could be proposed.
Yes.
Are we discussing this motion now?
Yeah, yes, we're discussing this
We got a
ordinance.
motion and a
This
second.
motion, we got a motion.
All right, discussion on this motion, but not the overall ordinance. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
got it. Just making sure, limit my discussion. So the only changes that I have are on line 2, you see including the technical memos, and then the first enactment clause on the second line, it adds including the technical memos, and then the line further downward says with the modification of Land Bay E to be designated for conservation to remain a forested area. Mr. Mayor, I have a few questions about this, if I may ask them.
Sure. And I hope that, well, one of the reasons I want to use that is so the public can keep up with us in terms of that, because we're talking and they can understand and see what we're saying. Mr. Chairman, I don't want to keep you up, going back up and forth, but if you would take that light and as people ask those specific questions, you would show them what we're doing. Let's see. Mr. Go ahead.
Yellow area.
No, thank you. So I'll ask Councilman Volson the question about with this piece of property, the piece that is, I guess, Land Bay E, who is the owner of that property? Have you discussed this plan with them? Do they own other pieces of this property? And what feedback have they provided you as to this plan?
I've not discussed it with the owner of this land.
Okay. Has anyone here on council had an opportunity to speak directly with the property owners that are proposing this?
I actually haven't spoken to any of the property owners.
I will say that this idea of removing, if you remember when the consultants presented, I think it was the last time they presented the plan, the consultants at that time pointed out that this area could be ultimately preserved as a conservation area, and that they indeed did have conversations with the landowners, and there were some questions as to whether or not they could cost effectively develop that as single family anyway. That's probably the extent of the conversation I think that took place. That was presented by the consultants at the last time, I believe it was the last time.
And that was conveyed to us.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Right.
So based on that feedback, it seems like we're proposing saving a piece of land that they probably might not be able to develop anyways.
Correct.
So to me, it's not, even if we adopted the original plan, they probably couldn't develop that piece even though it shows that it's in there. I will say overall that this substitute ordinance that's in here, I don't think that even adding these technical memos in here or the preservation of land that probably already cannot be developed, that makes this plan any better in my personal opinion.
The only thing
I'll be opposing the motion.
The only thing I would clarify in my comments is I do not believe that the consultants indicated the land could not be developed. The question was whether or not financially it made sense for them to do that. They did not, there's nothing physically that keeps that area from being developed. So I just want to be clear that what I represented from what they were saying was that there may be financial reasons why they would choose not to do so. Not that they couldn't, but why they would choose not to.
So if I restate my purpose in that, we would be offering to remove the part that they seem as least economically viable for them, so not what they're seeking to do with this entire adoption plan anyways. It still supports my original opposition to the substitute, that it really does not make this plan any better, in my opinion, to have this in there. I think that it's something small to offer, but it doesn't warrant making the whole plan better at all. So I'll oppose this motion.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
I don't either. They can develop that if they wanted to, and it's also, it's where the wetlands are. If you've been to the property like I have and walked over it and been throughout it, then you would know that that is a low-lying area.
Yes.
That is where most of the wetlands are. And so if we're trying to preserve Evans Springs and make sure that it's able to be flooded appropriately, whether that's now or in the future, so that downtown doesn't get flooded, then that is, that's not an insignificant thing to give up 6 acres of developable land. That's a lot of money that could be made by a developer there. I'd like to call the question.
Would have a motion.
What are we doing now?
Second.
I called the question.
Question.
Okay, so you
On the
want us to
docket,
go
the new one.
on
Just
the
call the
motion?
question.
All right,
Closed discussion, no more debate, call the roll.
all right. Call a vote on this ordinance.
On the amendment.
This is only on the amendment to
It's the-
On the
substitute the
amended
ordinance.
ordinance.
Yes.
All right, Ms. Whiteboy,
Aye.
Mr. Volleson,
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds,
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Aye.
Mr. Pretty,
No.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
No.
and Mayor Lee.
Aye. So the ordinance has been approved.
Ordinance has been substituted.
Substituted. Another substitute ordinance in front of us.
Discussion continues.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Discussion can continue as to the ordinance.
Yes.
The primary motion, well,
And Mr. Mayor, I am ready to make my comment.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I can make mine now.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I will read my statement. As many of my colleagues have received an enormous number of emails from communities throughout the city in opposition of adopting the proposed Evans Spring Development Plan. I also took the time to attend the Planning Commission meeting held on Monday, February the 11th, hoping to gain additional understanding and perhaps help guide my decision. This was not the case. In fact, it validated the concerns noted by those in opposition. Up until now, when a decision is before the council, there have not been any comments or presentations on record from the Economic Development Director, who was in attendance at the Planning Commission, but he never spoke. The Economic Development Authority, who showed up too, who are not for the authority, but spoke on their own behalf, or even from the landowners who supposedly have the most interest in this property, or their representatives, other than all three, with the city included, paying $75,000 each for a total amount of $225,000 to hire a consultant to help create this plan. Throughout the entire process, the community, which consists of residents living near the Evans Spring area, the Melrose Rugby, Villa Heights, and Fairland Lake neighborhood representatives, concerned residents across the city, and persons with expertise in conservation and planning and development, all have gone on record opposing this plan for various reasons. Now, I want to be clear, I am not opposed to economic development. New commercial, mixed residential opportunities for the city. In fact, I would like to see more of mixed residential opportunities to help with the housing crisis that this city faces. My pause is the unanswered questions that still need responses, and those were listed actually in the City Planning Commission report before this plan should be considered for approval. Again, I support commercial development. However, it is difficult to disregard comments from those who have expressed serious concerns that have yet to be addressed being neighborhood needs, environmental conditions, etc. And I wish to point out that there are various locations throughout the Northwest business corridors that are underutilized and could be redeveloped through some type of collaboration with those owners. Perhaps consideration could be given to creating a business association that could help rebuild those stressed main thoroughfares, meaning Route 460 from Salem to Roanoke County going west or east, and also along 11th Street where we have developed an economic development plan for that area. So I ask that this is something that the council take into consideration as we finish our deliberations on this issue. Thank you.
All right. Anybody?
The amendment made some of my comments mute, but I'm glad you made that amendment, because I do think, like the mayor said, I agree. I think it did make a difference. But first, I just want to say thank you to all of the residents that came down and spoke, even for those of you that showed up at the Planning Commission. That was a long hearing as well. So I want to say thank you for that. These are truly unprecedented times in our region, and our neighbors, and I'm talking about our neighbors surrounding us, are growing at a rate twice as fast because they are taking advantage of commercial opportunities and development. So Evan Springs right now is currently an area that we're looking at for potential development, like they keep repeating over and over again. There has not been any developer identified. All we're trying to do is add it to the master plan. And I actually took time to meet with the director, our real estate director, Casey Bratton, and his team, along with Mr. Robinson and Amelia Merchant, and I'm glad I did, because I have a much better understanding of the city's real estate, the impact on our local economy, and the development in all four quadrants of our city. The Northeast, like someone mentioned earlier, has the largest apartment development in the history of Roanoke going in right now, almost 768 units. And there's also an additional 188 units planned for an existing apartment community with 100 homes in development, all of this going on down 460. And we're looking at a potential $50 to $100 million in investment just in Northeast. The southeast quadrant of our city, I'm sure you've heard over and over again how excited we are about the 100 acres targeted for redevelopment in the Forma Visco plant, representing about 50 million to 100 million in redevelopment. And we actually got calls and emails from members of the southeast community who were thrilled that finally something was being done in that southeast community. The southwest quadrant, excluding Carillion, 50 million investment in the expansion of the hospital. There's going to be another 50 million targeted towards the new cancer center with high-end homes and apartment complexes. So this alone, we're looking at 25 million to 75 million dollars. So as you can see, Northwest is not alone in our city for redevelopment. You know, there was a time when I first moved to Roanoke, folks would complain that there was no development in Roanoke City, in Northwest. And I live in Northwest. I live less than 1 mile from Evan Springs. I walk that greenway when it was warm just about every day. So I know exactly where you are. And I know that I've heard from many, many members of the community saying, why do you always overlook Northwest? And, you know, I don't understand, because every time there's an opportunity to do something in Northwest, the residents object, and I'm one of them. I live in Northwest. I have friends that live in Northwest, but I want this body to know that that is not the sentiment of the entire Northwest community. I talk to people all the time. I listen to people all day long, and there are people who are not in favor of this plan. But you also have to realize that there are people who live in Northwest. There are thousands of residents in Northwest that we hear from, and we have to hear from just about everybody. And also, the Planning Commission. I asked the clerk to send me the link. I listened to all 2 hours. And I want you to know that they took their time and they did their due diligence. They did their homework. And they listened to everyone who attended that public hearing. And they voted 5-2. Our commissioners on that planning commission voted 5-2. 2 of those commissioners, James Smith and Scott Terry Kabler, grew up in Northwest and agreed that they want to see some development in Northwest. They agreed that they talked to their friends. They grew up there. Nobody loves this city more than Jay Smith and Scott Terry Kabler. Nobody is more proud. I gave you all an opportunity to speak, and I sat here in this seat quietly, and I listened, and I think I deserve the same respect. I have heard from the friends of Evan Springs, and a lot of those friends sent emails from Northern Virginia, Falls Church, Arlington. You don't get any more developed than those areas. Those folks can walk to just about anywhere they want to. They don't even need transportation. They have mass transportation that can take them anywhere they want to go. We've also heard from friends of Evan Springs that live in Southwest, where they have the fresh market. They have Earth Fair. They have Towers Mall. They have the Grandin, where they can walk to the Grandin Theater. They can walk to the Co-op. They can walk to restaurants. They can walk to just about anything that they want to get whatever they need. And I think that Northwest, I would love to see that in the community where I live. I'm talking about a community where I live, not where, because I've heard those people in Northwest. I guess I'm one of those people in Northwest because I'm right there on the corner. I think that this would be a good thing if we're fortunate enough to get someone to come in. This doesn't even, there's no guarantee that there's going to be a developer. But Mayor, I just have one final comment. I know I've gone on, but I'm sure that some folks will say, we're talking about dollars. No, actually what I see is revenue for our schools, those potholes in the street, compensation for our employees, and jobs, economic growth, and a walkable, and that's important for a lot of people, a walkable, thriving community. So that's my comment on this amended plan, Mayor. Thank you.
Well, thank you. What, any other council members?
I have a lot to say.
Go for it.
It'll be a change of pace. And please forgive me because of my voice. Also, I have not organized my thoughts as much as I'd like to on this. And I've been trying to listen to other council members and make sure that I can address everything that's been brought up. First, though, and Mayorly, I do promise that I'm going to keep decorum, but I want to do a quick exercise. I won't judge the people standing up on the walls, but for everyone who's sitting in the audience, for the original ordinance that was put up today, adopting this plan, stand up if you support it. I just want to see you. Okay. Well, I got one all the way in the back. All right. Now that we've adopted this substitute ordinance that puts in these technical memos and saves that small piece of land, is there anybody who wants to stand up now?
Well, I don't understand. What is just, Mr.
I'm just trying to gauge from the people here today about the change that was made. Would anyone stand if they support the ordinance now that we've changed it to save that small piece of land, that section E, and to add the technical memos in? Do you think it's gained any more support from anyone here? All right, so now I'm going to go back to my comments. Part of why I also oppose that, and I do think that it's good to have that conservation in there, is that generally in parliamentary procedure and in support, if you support an amendment, you're saying that you support the entire bill. I do hope that some people who voted for the amendment do vote against the entire ordinance.
You can vote for an amendment and not have to support the bill.
You can.
I just want to be clear.
You can. That you're not held to it, but to vote for it can demonstrate support for the underlying measure. And I wanted to make sure that it was clear that I do not support the underlying measure that's being brought forward to us today. I don't support where this started from. I don't think that it started from a place of trust from where I was before I was on council. Knowing that there's a plan that was adopted in 2013, and that's really what's got us into the place where we are now. It was the plan that was adopted then that said this is the direction we are going. No matter how many times I've spoken to different people, and within city administration I've been told this council has a policy that this area will be developed, and that is why we are going that direction. But I know I couldn't get a majority to go the other direction. Maybe I could at least get them to not adopt this plan, at least get them to not rezone this to be commercial. I mean,
It's not a rezoning.
It's not a rezoning.
thank you. I know it's not a rezoning. I think that by having this process in here, just doing another plan before rezoning even comes in, all we are doing is prolonging the torment, the heartache, the advocacy that has to go on within this community as they oppose this. Even after this is done, there'll be a rezoning they can show up for. They can oppose that. We will go through this again. If that rezoning goes through, when we look at financing, when we talk about bonds for the bridge that's going to have to go here, when we talk about if we have to get VDOT, Smart Scale involved, they have public hearings for that. And I can only imagine the Commonwealth Transportation Board and all of our surrounding neighbors around us deciding that they want to fund a project in our locality that has so much opposition from the people that live within it and around it. This is not the end of the process, no matter what happens tonight, either for it or against it. But I have more reasons to bring up that are fair to say. I really wish we weren't going in this direction, but I know that we are. Once this area is developed, it is natural history that can never be put back. Now, I do want to address property owners own this. We do not. They have rights to develop it. But I heard at an earlier council meeting, we do not own the land. I wish that we had more control over it. But one of the things that bothers me the most about local government is the lack of authority that we get from the General Assembly about what we can do. But one of the things that we can do is land use. That's something that we vote on. We do not own the land, but we zone the land. What we decide it can be used for is ultimately what it can be used for. And if we don't vote for that, they can't. When they purchased this property, it was zoned for a certain use. They knew that they could do whatever they want with it, and they can with it now under that zoning. But when we rezone it, some speaker brought up earlier, that changes the value of it. Even as we're looking at all of the, on the right hand, the Land Bay D, the right-hand side, mostly as you get closer to where the interchange will be. That is plotted out for roughly 100 or so single-family homes right now that were never built by the person who bought those properties. That could be a neighborhood. It could be integrated. Those could be families who are living there now. But even as we think about that decision, we're on the cusp of considering this massive zoning reform that will allow people to build multiple dwellings on their single-family lots as they currently exist. That's not before us now, but in either way, if we go towards that direction, the property owner will have that, the value of that land will change. The property owner will have other options of what they can do with that land at that point in time. If this had come to us in pieces, if the property owners had come to us individually and we could actually speak to them, if they came to us with zoning amendments on individual pieces, I mean, the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. I could see a way in which parts of this develop in a way that integrate with the neighborhood, that do not involve a $50 million minimum interchange, that does not need to connect with I-81. We don't need that connection there. But seeing that put in there, and they said, we don't want that connection to the neighborhood, what I saw was a plan that was developed, did not feel like it was done with the neighborhood, it was done despite the neighborhood. How can we take these things into consideration and still come up with the goal that we want and need? Ultimately, we need more housing. That's what a lot of this was set up to do. That's what a lot of it can still be. And I hope that this plan fails. I hope that we don't have to go forward with this rezoning. And if so, but we need the neighborhood to truly then come to the table. We need to put together a plan that can actually work for this area, that does not put us on a poor economic footing with certain uncertainty going forward. We do not need more retail. I really hate using props, but I can't not today. This is like the top half of the Wall Street Journal, front page. Commercial property losses bruise banks around the globe. There's so many losses happening, especially post-COVID, as we see across the way with 581, with commercial property that's not being invested in properly. Why do we believe that we really need so much more here? Amazon is moving their last mile facility here, and that's wonderful. But you know what that tells me? The market is moving online. The market is not just moving to these big box retailers. And to say that we're going to put the crux of our plan on that right there, I really wish that these property owners had come individually, that we had seen pieces of a plan that could have been developed that integrated with the neighborhood. What I said in the beginning is that my vote is with the neighborhood. If the neighborhood supports what we're doing, then I'll go for it. But I earlier said I don't know that this will. I know now that it won't. So I'll be voting no tonight.
Are there any more campaign speeches in here before we keep going?
Mayor Lee, I find that offensive.
Well, that's what that was, a campaign speech.
No, Mayor Lee, I find that offensive. I have not asked for votes, and I have not said anything about an election.
That's what it is. Who's next? Council members? Who's next? Have you?
Go ahead. No, that's okay.
Are you going to say anything?
I might, but go ahead.
All right. Is anybody else?
Yes, I'm taking a deep breath. There's a lot of heat in the room tonight. I want to share some reflections, and I want to talk about something that really has not been addressed tonight, and that's healing. On February 5th, we talked about community engagement and the struggles, there's no doubt in my mind that there's been a lot of community engagement here, but the focus of that engagement is what I struggle with. I think there's been a lot of talking at each other and not as much deep listening as I think could have been helpful in getting us to a little different place. At the February 5th meeting, I talked about the fact that, a lot of what we're experiencing here has been uncovered and uprooted. There's a lot of healing that has not happened, a lot of trauma that has not been addressed. Dr. Jones talked about that at length tonight. So my concern is that if we just keep layering that on without continuing to do the work of healing throughout the decisions that we make, that we've got a missed opportunity. I encourage us as a city to think about the wholeness of our city. And I really believe that everyone in this room tonight cares about the wholeness of our city. And that's showing up in a lot of different ways. We also have to pay attention to how healing practices are emerging, not only through the assets and gifts of this land, but through the conversations and the engagement that's happening and even the speeches that have been shared tonight. These are all part of what guide us toward a healthier future as a community. I also recognize that to build trust, we must tend to healing work, and if we don't, trust will never occur. And this must accompany any potential development efforts in our city. I think it's nearly impossible for local government to provide a pathway toward healing. As I've learned through my own life, organizations are not capable of that. It's just not in the DNA. But it is in the DNA of people. It is in the DNA of land. And those two things have to work together to create pathways for healing and for restoring trust. Our 2040 comprehensive plan says that Roanoke recognizes that past interactions have eroded trust in certain communities. Policies for trust focus on community healing and government accountability. And so I've been asking myself, how does this plan before us promote community healing and government accountability? I commend the work that's been done. Hours and hours and hours have been spent on creating this plan. The consultants, our staff, the Planning Commission, Friends of Evans Spring, other citizens. It's hard for us to count the hours that have gone into this because we're so passionate about this city and we care about this city. So there is a level of government accountability, and we've seen some evidence of that here tonight. Where I think we are way behind and don't really have a plan for is in reference to community healing. And until we proactively and thoughtfully create a process for community healing, we're just going to see this sort of effort recycle itself over and over and over again. So tonight, what I've heard is a collision of sorts between visions for this land. And I've heard different starting places. I think the consultants and staff have gone with what we've built on. What of this land is developable? My starting place is different. I started looking at Evans Spring from the perspective of the land. What gifts and assets does this land provide, and how can we honor those gifts and assets while creating more accessible opportunities, whether it's housing or retail, for the people who live nearby? And there are components of this plan that I like, and I want to share a couple of those. In addition to the efforts that have been made to preserve this, which I appreciate, I don't think there's enough of it. But I do like that this creates access. and it creates a plan for restoration. So in other words, a way for the public to actually see it without trespassing. I like the possibility for additional and affordable residential housing. I do have concern about the density of it. I love the potential for a village center. I like this idea that people who live nearby, even those who currently live there, could have walkable access to basic things that they would need. Right now, it's scattered. It's hard to get to and you can't walk to it. While I didn't vote in support of the substitute motion, I do like that there could be a potential for a larger swath of parkland there, and somewhere on here I would love to see some kind of a nature center that could be part of that. But here are my concerns related to the plan. I think this is way too much of a reduction in woodland cover. I'm very concerned about removing the number of trees. Very concerned. I'm concerned about the density of commercial and residential. As I said, I'm not opposed to all of it, but I am concerned that it far outweighs the number of trees that would be removed from this property. I'm also very concerned about the increased impervious surfaces, and I know that there's technology now that a lot of that can be mitigated and we can be creative. But I think the thing that probably bothers me the most is that, and if I were going to make any amendment to this, it would be to replace Development Plan 1391 with, at a minimum, Optional Development Plan 13.9.2. And here's my reason. I believe that the implication that if residents of Top Hill Drive choose not to sell their land, then we could go to option 13.9.2. One of the non-negotiables was do not take any housing from current neighborhood residents. I don't believe residents who live on Top Hill Drive should experience any pressure, I mean zero, related to selling their home and land, and I know they have from previous experience. And while this plan gives an option, it's not the leading option. So if you live on Top Hill Drive and you look at this plan, not this plan, 13.91, which is the recommended one, you don't see your house there anymore. You see something else. And I just have serious concerns about that. So, hold on. So as I said, I don't expect this plan to create healing in the community. But I think we have serious work to do as a city to address community healing. And we need to think about how we're going to do that, which is a separate issue, but it's interrelated. And I started with the land here, and I think the city has done what it was tasked with doing, starting with not ignoring the land, but what of this land can be developed. And those are two different starting places. And for me, that creates some conflict. So I thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to share those reflections. And I really appreciate everybody that's come out tonight. You remind me why I love this city. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'll make it short. Yes.
Okay.
I just want to make it short. I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight and giving us your input, for your emails, and for those, Mr. Sweet and Rosemary, that took me on a tour of the springs. I thank you. Thank you. But to me, you asked me to protect Evans Springs. To me, this plan protects Evans Springs. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm the last one up. Let me just say that, and it's all been talked about, but first of all, when we're talking about Evans Springs, let me tell you what we've had tonight, what it is. Council has taken and action to adopt a master plan to set policy for future development. We're talking about a certain number of acres. It's important to note that this plan and this action that we're taking tonight to adopt this master plan is to build specific policies to incorporate community feedback and benefits in the neighborhood. That's what we're doing. It's not a rezoning. As I mentioned earlier, that's going to come later. This is not a rezoning, but this gives you, the citizens, an opportunity to make sure that policy that we incorporate, that policies are incorporated to give you feedback into what's going on. And that's what we're doing. The citizen cannot and will not ever use eminent domain. I've even heard that said at some point. But to acquire private properties for private development, really. And it's not easy, but I'm proud of the work that the Planning Commission, the city administration has done, the community meetings, those people who open their doors in the neighborhoods to meet and to engage the community on this topic. There's been a lot of engagement. And I know we all don't agree, but we don't agree, but I think we all want the same goal. And I want to commend Mr. Volson for his work on looking at this ordinance and making sure that it's as close to a compromise as we can. There'll be some areas that are protected. That's protected out there. So even if you don't agree, at least there's some area that'll be protected. And I think that's important. And we talk about housing. You've heard us talking, and we took an oath to do what we can for this city. I love Northwest. I live in Northwest. I shop in Northwest. Everything. We took an oath to do what we can to make this city a great place to live, work, and play for all of our citizens. And we got a task before us where there are about 4,000 units. We got a housing deficit of 4,000 units in this city. This plan recommends some homes, 600 homes for people that need a place to live. We're losing population in this city. We're losing population. That's a fact. So I think as we go forward, we have to make sure we do all we can to make Roanoke that viable city that it deserves. So that's what we're doing tonight. Again, I expected some disagreements on this, but I think the effort in this council is putting forth an effort to make this agreeable a plan that really gives everybody something out of it. And I think you'll continue to have input. This is not locking the door on what we're doing tonight, but because of their work, the work of the Planning Commission that listened, and we had a 2-hour meeting to do all those things there. And we asked them to go in detail to listen to that, and I think they've done that. And so I think what we're doing tonight, and why I like the ordinance, is that we're doing that to really get to the bottom of this, but you're still a part of it right now. But we want to agree and move in and make sure that we adopt this plan because we think it's best for us going forward. And the city needs to go forward. And as my former colleague alluded to, John Garland, is that there are some tough decisions we have to make. And there's something everybody can look at and think about, hey, this is what I prefer and this is what we prefer. But we have to look at it as a city and as a council. So with that being said, I think everybody's had to say on this. All right, Madam Clerk, we're ready to call the roll on the adoption of the master plan.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Volleson?
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
No.
Ms. Sanchez Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Pretty?
No.
Mr. Cobb?
No.
And Mayor Lee?
Aye. So, Mr. Spencer, that means we have to have a second reading
Yes,
on this?
but we do not have to have a second public hearing,
Okay,
just a second reading.
second reading. All right, thank you. All right. Thank you all. We'll go to the next item.
You all know better! Shame on you!
Hey, you need to get out of here with that.
We're a neighborhood, and you know better.
Hey, take him out of the chamber.
It's the truth. Northwest Roanoke, voting against Northwest Roanoke. Shame on
I was hoping you know.
Susan Evans Brown.
You're right. That guy must be a little deep in nowhere, doesn't he? Hey, this feels like a big stadium meeting to me.
I never got
Good job. Good job. Council's still in session, please. If you gotta discuss it, go outside the door. We're still in session.
Must not be here. No, everybody's still.
All right, we're down to the hearing of citizens upon public matters. City Council sets this time as a priority for citizens to be heard. If deemed appropriate, matters will be referred to the city manager for response, recommendation, or report to council. Madam Clerk, are there any people signed to speak?
Well, I have two speakers, and I'm not sure if they're here. Susan Evans Brown and Dwayne Howard, and he is not here.
Oh, he's gone.
That was it.
That's it? All right. All right, there being no further business to come to this council, the council meeting is adjourned. See everybody tomorrow morning at Wasena 3.